From Chesapeake, Virginia, the Lighthouse 100.1 presents Sports Scene. Sports Scene features local, regional, and nationally acclaimed guests and excellent interviews. Follow Sports Scene on Twitter at Greg Bick. Now here is Greg Bicouvaris.
Sports Scene presented by HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com. Sports Scene midweek online, Saturday on the radio on WPMH, AM 1010, 100.1 FM, and TuneIn.com by typing WPMH in the search bar. Greg Bicouvaris along with Colleen. Tell your friends about Sports Scene, Twitter at Greg Bick, and you can see the rest of my Twitter handles on GJBTV.com. Thank you to our military and our presenting sponsor, GJBTV.com. Phone line presented by the Newport News Greek Festival coming up May 28th through May 31st. College basketball, no dominant team this year. Old Dominion and Virginia are playing so-so. The NBA is heating up. Great interviews, excellent guests, business segments, highlights, commentary, what tees me off. Thank you for listening to Sports Scene. We love our regulars, tourists who listen online and on the radio. Stay tuned. Mark your calendar for May 28th to May 31st as Saints Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church in Newport News presents the Newport News Greek Festival. Eat, drink, and celebrate authentic Greek culture on the peninsula. Located at 60 Traverse Road, off exit 258B on Route 17 in Newport News. Celebrating a taste of Greece in Newport News. For more, log on to newportnewsgreekfestival.org.
Sports Scene, Hampton Roads' premier interview show with Greg Bicouvaris, each Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11.
And you look at that, 4-4 at home, which is just average, 4-3-1 on the road. I mean, you're not going to win any games like that. They were not the same team after they beat the Packers, yet the Packers were a totally different team.
Interact with Sports Scene on Twitter at Greg Bick and listen weekly as Greg interviews distinguished guests with excellent commentary and insight. Sports Scene, Saturdays at 10 a.m. on the Lighthouse 100.1 FM. You are listening to Sports Scene with Greg Bicouvaris. Now, back to Greg.
And welcome back to Sports Scene. Glad you're with us every Saturday morning from 10 to 11. Greg Bicouvaris along with our featured guest this show, Paul Fuqua. Paul, good to talk to you again.
It's always nice to see you, Greg.
We've had Paul on Sports Scene. He's also had a show as well in the past, and we look forward to talking about the past, present, and future, basketball, politics, real estate, a whole gamut of things. Paul, first of all, tell us about your sports background.
My sports background is that of an undistinguished high school career, 1 year of college football at Georgetown University, which was club ball level, but I was a basketball junkie. And had the opportunity to start coaching little kids, and it escalated from there and ended up coached several years at D1 as an assistant, and I had two high school programs of which I was the head coach.
Of course, Paul's got DMV roots, and you got roots at American University and Georgetown.
Yes, and UDC under George Leftwich. Very
nice. The basketball scope in the DMV now, let's just go over it really quick. George Mason seems like they haven't been what they've been when Larinaga left. That was a long time ago now, several over a decade now. Absolutely. And you talk about Maryland, they have done pretty well in the Big Ten. They haven't really evolved to a national power in the NCAA tournament. Georgetown seems like they're getting better under Patrick Ewing. Took some rocky roads the first few years after replacing the legend John Thompson's son. And then, of course, George Washington had some coaching issues too. So what is the state of basketball in the DMV?
DMV is loaded with talent. And a great many of the players being recruited out of DMV don't want to stay home. I think that's one of the keys. That was not true a generation or two ago, in that the local schools drew local talent. Unfortunately for those schools, including Georgetown, the local talent is looking for an adventure outside the Baltimore, D.C. area.
When you talk about that, too, so many legends there. Of course, John Thompson, Lefty Driesell come to mind, Gary Williams, so many great coaches. Even Craig Esherick was there for a stint.
Tom Young.
Yep. John Thompson, his son, was there at Georgetown. Tom Young, of course, the former Old Dominion coach as well, who was up there in the DMV, too. But American even, too, has had some great coaches, too, as well, like Jeff Jones and several of your friends.
Definitely Chris Nockey, who succeeded Eddie Tapscott, who Tapscott went on to be with the Knicks for at least 10 years as a VP for them, and then was a VP under Grunfeld with the Wizards. Now that there's been a change in the regime there, I think Eddie Tapscott is able to sit back and enjoy a semi-retirement.
And it's well-deserved, too. I mean, he used to coach in that small little gym at American University. I remember as a student at George Mason, I went there with Bob Gocke, and I said, what type of facility is this?
I don't know if you ever were in the Cassell Center, which was a bandbox of a gym on the north side of Massachusetts Avenue. During that time, that was our practice facility, but we played at Fort Myers Ceremonial Hall.
That's right.
Where they actually held horse activities, equestrian activities. And Coach Tapscott was quoted as saying it's the only gym in the world that has a equivalency. What do you call it? Chill complex. You got wind chill equivalent.
Very good. Almost like an ice hockey place without the hockey rink, but very cold, very damp. I actually did some broadcasting from there, but it was very intimate to begin with. But and of course, recently Morgan Wooten passed away.
Yes, Morgan. I was the head coach at Mackin Catholic High School. And had been an assistant at Gonzaga College High School in D.C., both of which were in the Catholic League or the WCAC with DeMatha, and we had to face Morgan and his minions at least twice a year, if not three, if we went to the Alhambra or any one of the other postseason tournaments. Morgan was as disciplined and organized and professional as you can hope a coach would be. He engendered a huge amount of loyalty in his players, and he enjoyed unparalleled success in D.C., in large part because he had, before the league enacted recruiting rules or anti-recruiting rules, he'd already established his feeder programs. He was light years ahead of everybody else.
Absolutely. Talking to Paul Fuqua, that's Fuqua, correct, Paul?
Yes, thank you.
Known Paul for several years, also very involved in real estate. Before we move on over to other topics in sports, the second half of the show, we will talk more about business and real estate. But Adrian Dantley, Sidney Lowe, Derek Wittenberg, Adrian Branch, players, especially Branch. I loved him in Maryland. Of course, Ernie Graham was from Baltimore. But a lot of those guys, they got their roots right there in the DMV.
Yeah, and Danny Ferry played there. James Brown played at DeMatha. Steve Hood, who went on to have tremendous success at the University of Maryland. The list is endless. John Gwynn went to Connecticut. I can remember scouting DeMatha before we would play them, and it was a question of not could we shut down one guy, but could we shut down three or four guys? Mm-hmm. And Morgan had his teams exceptionally well prepared. We were in a run of successful games. We were running some stuff that was a little bit off the wall and different at that time. And he was the only coach that figured out what we were doing and stopped us for the first 4 or 5 minutes of the first quarter of the game. And we went down 11. We got it back to 4, but did not win the ball game.
The best high school basketball event I've ever attended was the McDonald's Classic.
Mm-hmm.
It was at the Norfolk Scope, actually, in the late 90s, and my late father, Jim, and I had a chance to go to that. I was doing some TV work, but that was a staple up in the DMV at the Capitol Center.
Yes. As a matter of fact, you had the McDonald's All-Stars and the DC All-Stars, and they were played at any one of the big venues. And there were preliminary games before that were played at St. Stephen's and St. Albans and Gonzaga. And I had the opportunity to coach a couple of those teams. And that was fun. Great talent and great kids who just, for one reason or another, didn't make it onto that 12-man McDonald's DC All-Star team.
And speaking of which, of course, the ACC has been changed. Maryland back then was in the ACC. Now, since the 14-15 season, they've been in the Big Ten. I'm sorry, I'm a traditionalist. I think Maryland should still be in the ACC for football and basketball. Both.
I agree.
Maryland playing Minnesota on a cold weekday night doesn't cut it for me, home or away. Or if they play Illinois or Purdue, it's just not. There's no juice there for the alumni.
You are absolutely correct. And what I'm happy to see, I'm a Big East guy. And I'm happy to see that the Big East is being afforded respect once again. And it's a tough league. And the ACC, meanwhile, is somewhat down.
Yeah.
When you got Carolina getting thumped, you know that the ACC is down.
Look, I mentioned to you off there I'm going to be going to Greensboro for the NCAA tournament. I'm thinking that the powers that be thought that Duke would be there, Carolina. And the way it's going right now, Carolina might not even make the tournament.
They may not, but the kid Cole Anthony is he's going to come off the injury, and I think he's the glue that really made that thing happen. Unfortunately, though, he's a one and done.
Right, and there's not many more games left in the season either. Now, that's the thing, too, Paul, and congratulations, too, for UConn coming back to the Big East.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. I mean, the Big East, in my era, which was the 80s and 90s, it ruled the airwaves, in part because Dave Gavitt was the first one to realize the value of cable into the city. And Georgetown and Syracuse, those games, and Connecticut and Seton Hall, and it was just a phenomenal league. And it was a very bruising style of basketball because it was city basketball.
Right. And, of course, a lot of those schools are still there, the core of St. John's, Georgetown, Seton Hall, Providence. I call them the Big Four. And then you look at the ACC, Syracuse, Miami.
Boston College.
Which
was part of the Big East.
And Pittsburgh was a great rival, too. They're all in the ACC. At least, with Boeheim there's a linkage there.
Well, there was a thing on HBO, I don't know, within the past couple of years, which basically traced the demise of the Big East, and it was all football derived. Football generates that much more income, and you had Boston College, and you had Pittsburgh and Syracuse, all which were football schools first, and then they were eclipsed by basketball, and they wanted to get back in the big revenues streams out of football, and they certainly couldn't do it in the Big East because there were schools there that didn't want to go into that level of football. Georgetown, for God's sakes. I played at Georgetown. That's how crazy Georgetown was. The very breath, somebody saying something about Georgetown playing that level of football is incredible.
Talking to Paul Fuqua at Greg Bick on Twitter. Glad you're with us for Sports Scene every Saturday morning from 10 to 11 on 100.1 FM, 1010 AM. TuneIn.com, type in WPMH in the search bar. Also archived on YouTube and Twitter. You mentioned football, and that's the thing. Pretty much from August till after the Super Bowl, it's all football. And the thing about basketball, yes, there's a lot of games on TV, but people really don't pay attention. Their antenna's not up till after the Super Bowl. Football is a once-a-week event. Yes, there's a lot of games on TV, but the NFL is still the ratings king. Mm-hmm. College football is still powerful. I think college football is not as good as it used to be, in my opinion. I think it's watered down. College basketball is still very relevant. But do you think that basketball in general, including the NBA, is taking a big back seat to football still?
I think basketball has always taken a big back seat because it comes down to the money. You don't get the revenues out of a basketball program with the same kind of depth and breadth as you do in football. That's one. Two, basketball is a game in which it is said one team can pull an upset every once in a while. And actually a greater frequency than that because you only need two kids to really produce. Football is different completely. And we're in that era, that stage during the year when the rivalries are starting to kick in and there's nothing else being played football other than the Super Bowl, which is another week and a half, which I have always disagreed with. I think it should be a week.
Yeah, well, college football did the same thing. They skipped a week right there with the national championship and almost you lose the relevance. Mm-hmm. I mean, 2 weeks is a long time. Football, I get it. There's travel. There's a lot. The Super Bowl is an event. It's a big TV event. And, of course, there's a lot of teams involved.
Have you ever been to a Super Bowl?
No, my goal is to go next year in Tampa. That's my goal. I've been to an NFC championship. I've been to a all-star game in baseball, so that I'm knocking things off 1 year at a time. Mm-hmm. So talking to Paul Fuqua right here about sports, about broadcasting, about politics, and as well as business in the second 15 minutes. Let's talk gears to Old Dominion. Let's talk a little basketball before we talk football. Jeff Jones, a former American coach, has done very well, led them to the NCAA tournament last year. This year has been kind of a disaster, I'll have to say. It's not been a good season, but in that league, it really just matters what you do in the tournament.
I actually feel sorry for the fans of ODU because there is no natural rivalry in this league, and for both football and basketball. And as a consequence, the fervor of fans has fallen off. When they were part of the Colonial, and I was at AU, coming down here was just eye-opening. And then when I did a little radio after there was a coaching change, it was even more phenomenal. And right now, I don't see the fervor and the fan in the stands for the rivalries because there aren't any.
Yeah, the biggest rivalries are when they play non-conference schools. Old Dominion beat Virginia Tech a couple years ago, but the Tech fans will say, well, we beat them more times than they beat us. I get that, too. But as well, I mean, Old Dominion, when they have to go to Texas for rivalries, even Adam Winkler, a good friend of mine who's the sports guy at Channel 3, he's from Texas, and he doesn't even know much about these schools. Right. So they're playing non-relevant schools. There's nobody on a Wednesday night saying, I can't wait to see Old Dominion playing a school from Alabama or Texas. They're used to, like you said, James Madison, George Mason,
sure,
and those type schools.
Absolutely. If the ODU were to realign and include, let's go, Liberty, James Madison, William and Mary, who else? Longwood. I mean, some of the schools may not be able to compete on that level, but you'd elevate them. And there's nothing better than local in-state rivalries. It's phenomenal that they aren't playing more of those. Like tonight, there's a Georgetown game, and I know if I can't be there, I'm gonna be taping it.
Absolutely, and of course, I always like to watch Syracuse because I love Boeheim and I love the zone. I just love the zone. It seems like, and he has beaten Virginia and Virginia Tech this year because of that zone, not because he's got better talent than they do. He's got a young team, including his son, but he's got that zone, and that zone still confuses teams.
Yeah, that's always been amazing to me, that you could use that 2-3 so effectively and create so many turnovers. But I'm convinced that offensively minded teams become impatient. And he recruits long players. They may be 6'6", 6'7", but they have wingspans that are 7'1", 7'2" to cover up the passing lanes.
Right. It's all a matter of shooting well.
Georgetown beat them.
Yeah, they did back in December.
Hey, it still beat them.
Right. Okay.
That was a huge game for Georgetown.
Right. But Georgetown, is we'll get to Georgetown a little bit here in a second. But also, you mentioned Georgetown in the revenue. Their football program makes no money. No. And it's all about the basketball. But
yes. Wait a minute. They won the national championship in soccer.
Yeah, but does anybody know that besides you?
Yeah, the NCAA knows that.
Of course.
And UVA knows that.
Right. I'm talking mostly about revenue sports, football and basketball. But yes, Georgetown's got a great academic school. There was a movie filmed there several years ago there, too. I think The Exorcist was filmed.
Yeah, I watched that being filmed.
Yeah, and those steps, I actually walked up and down those steps. It's kind of eerie.
That house was owned by a lady who ran the Mary Lasker Foundation, and I was her gardener when I was in college. Wow. And used to till the beds and all. And they built on an extension because her house faces the steps. There was not an extension out over the steps.
Yeah, you talk about events that I went to. 2014, Georgetown played West Virginia in the NIT. I worked it in McDonough Arena. Great. It was the best basketball experience I've ever had for college basketball. It was a small, intimate, high school-like gym. John Thompson coached several teams there in the 70s and the 80s, too, and occasionally they'd come back for a cameo appearance. Will they ever play another game? That wasn't that long ago, 6 years ago.
They'll play games in there, the early games, because some of the early season games are ones that you want that kind of intimacy. When I had season tickets many years ago, when Big John had just taken over the job, that's when Craig Shelton and John Bebe Dern were playing. All those games were at McDonough, and it was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. That's where the Kenner League is held. That's where I took my Mackin teams, and we played DeMatha there, and we played Indian River there. We played a number of games because our gym could only seat 250 people.
All right, we'll take a short break, come back with more Paul Fuqua on Sports Scene after these messages. Mark your calendar for May 28th to May 31st as Saints Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church in Newport News presents the Newport News Greek Festival. Eat, drink, and celebrate authentic Greek culture on the peninsula. Located at 60 Traverse Road, off exit 258B on Route 17 in Newport News. Celebrating a taste of Greece in Newport News. For more, log on to newportnewsgreekfestival.org.
Catch up on archived editions of Sports Scene by going to gjbtv.com and clicking the YouTube image on the homepage. Now back to Sports Scene with Greg Bicouvaris.
And welcome back to Sports Scene, part 2 of the interview with Paul Fuqua. Greg Bicouvaris, glad you're with us. Also, don't forget Countdown to 300 Sports Highlights, March of 2020 on nnpstv.com, Cox Cable 47 517 in Newport News. And don't forget, the NCAA tournaments are right around the corner. Hard to believe we're not that far away. It goes by pretty quick after conference play.
It's amazing how quickly years telescope and seasons telescope. I'm blanking. Here we are at the end of the pro season. The Super Bowl is right around the corner, and we're not that far from the NCAAs.
You're exactly right, and not to mention, the All-Star break in the NBA really isn't the All-Star break because they've already played over 41 games and it's an 82-game season. So it's kind of a push toward the NBA playoffs. But there's nothing like March Madness. I think what's great about college basketball is still March Madness.
The one and done is spectacular, and it's the time of the year that my wife and I are at odds because I'll stay up and watch every game I possibly can. And I'll tape any of the ones that I can't see or don't want to see until then I'll come back and flip through them, especially if there's an upset. It's a marvelous time to be a basketball fan.
The first Thursday and Friday is the best time of the year.
Exactly.
All right, before we talk about Paul Fuqua and real estate, Bobby Wilder, let's give props to him. He was there for a long time, but I kind of equate it to a good Diet Coke. You open it up and the fizz is there, but after a while, the fizz just started going down.
You have to give the man and the administration credit for building a program rapidly and very professionally and very well. But after 10 years, the bloom is off the rose. Because the social impact, the panache of being there at the wine and cheese crowd at the tailgates and the appeal of that has diminished, and it's made even more evident when the team doesn't win.
Absolutely. And yes, they beat Virginia Tech, but unfortunately too many losing seasons in a row. You got to sell the stadium. You got to sell the luxury boxes, and, suites. And that's so important as far as football and basketball. Suites are just a really big deal. People want all the comforts of home. They want Wi-Fi. Sometimes March Madness is better on TV.
I know I attended a number of ODU games in the boxes of friends of mine, and it was as though I was not at a football game.
Yeah.
Because we can be back there at the bar, or we can be eating food stuff when the food was magnificent, and watching the game that's right outside on the screen. It was the same thing with the Redskins boxes. That's not football as far as I'm concerned.
And
a man cave.
In the last several Redskins games I worked, I felt like I was at a road game because but they're just not winning. But they got a new coach now, Ron Rivera. Hopefully they'll have a good cycle in 2020. You can't go any worse.
Yeah, they can.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, they can. They still got Snyder. Let's face it.
All right. Well, let's give Snyder a little credit. He used to own the stations I work for, as you know.
Uh-huh.
And how many owners of an NFL team are in their 30s when he started? He was in his mid-30s.
He was one of those fans that wanted to sniff around the players, and he's that today. I don't care.
He's still a young man.
He's a jerk as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. No comment. I didn't say that.
Hey,
that was Paul
remember,
Fuqua.
at one time I owned a printing business.
Oh, I know you
in
did.
the Washington, D.C. area. And
Sure.
The Redskins were one of our customers. And I had to deal with the staff, and I had to deal every once in a while with Jack Kent Cook. And now that man was phenomenal.
Wow.
And the story I tell is that we had a deal that we were doing a special run of trading cards in concert with Mobil Oil. And this was back when Jacoby and those guys were on the squad. And we had to control it very tightly. And we'd given a quote, and the quote was $48,000 for this print job. And the staff called up and said, "Paul, when you come out, bring your proposal, make it $64,000." I said, "Wait a minute." He said, "No, just bring it out, $64,000. So I did. Rolled out there, and they ushered me in, and there's Mr. Cook, in all his finery, and he had this great voice, and he's sitting behind this highly polished mahogany desk, and I mean, the man looked like a king, and I was somewhat intimidated, but I still. Anyway, so I sat down in front of him and I presented the proposal, and he said $64,000, and I said, Mr. Cook, that's what your staff said that would be the. He said, nope. $48,000. That's what I'll pay you, Paul. I said, Mr.
No, he was right. The staff was wrong.
No. The staff set it up because they knew what he was going to do. So they were taking care of me because it was a legit $48,000 print job.
Good. Glad you got your money.
Yeah, and Jack Kent Cook, he was going to drive a hard bargain regardless.
And you don't need to say anything, but Snyder would never sit down with anybody like that. But anyway, it's all good. Talking to Paul Fuqua right here. Paul, one thing that's very intriguing, of course, in the DMV now is politics with Trump. We're not going to endorse any candidate here, but the vitriol, the hate, the anger the left-wing Democrats are giving toward Trump is unbelievable, right or wrong, when most presidents have had their shade thrown at them in the past. Let's just play sports here for a second.
So he has been impeached so that the Democrats have done what they set out to do. When the House changed hands, that you knew that was going to happen. The trial is taking place in the Senate, and I go back and remember with Clinton that he was impeached, and the trial was held in the Senate, and he was exonerated. I don't want to say exonerated, but he's not removed from office. And I anticipate that being the case with President Trump. Like him or hate him, the man is dynamic, and he has done a number of things that have benefited our country despite all the vitriol. Do I like him? No, I don't like him. Would I vote for him? Depends on who the other side runs. I would not be surprised to see a Michelle Obama be drafted. Although, she'd have to give up that multi-million-dollar house up there in the island.
I'm just talking 2020.
Right.
But I don't think there's a Democrat strong enough. The problem is
she'd be the only one.
Right. She would be, or even Hillary Clinton if she got back in.
No way.
But regardless, but Trump beat her already. But regardless, it just seems like there's a lot of Democratic infighting, and the odds of Bernie Sanders winning once or twice, it seems like it's slim.
It's like a horse race. I was a political science major. I was involved with a number of national campaigns. And there's nothing more invigorating than campaigning on a national basis for a presidency. It's a spectacular experience, and everybody should go through it. But the thing that you have to do is you have to realize that political winds can change overnight. All it takes is one significant stumble by any of the candidates. Now, I know that Trump he's ready to fall into a chasm at any moment, it would seem. At the same time, however, we've got record unemployment, we got record job growth, we got an economy that's still going very well, and people in a majority of instances vote their pocketbook. And I don't see anything on the horizon from the Democratic side that could improve the situation for the American public.
Yeah, there's no wow factor with the Democrats. And like you said, he was impeached. But for the most part, that would put somebody over the cliff and they wouldn't get reelected. I don't think that's going to be relevant at all. I think some people say, yeah, his credibility was tarnished a little bit, but I don't think that'll tip over the edge there.
I agree with you. Clinton was impeached in his second term, and Clinton stepped into that one. Of course, Nixon was never impeached. Because he resigned prior to, and he knew he didn't have the votes. He was gone because they got him for the machinations of his crazy staff. I'm very familiar with some of that stuff, and that'd be a book someday. Now, the others I'm really not totally aware of. But politics, I like to watch it from the standpoint of it being a game. And that's really what it is. It's a game, but with an awful lot at stake. Today, the game is being played at a level that's equivalent to it's worse than WWE. I mean, it's insane, the level of vitriol that we see that is so personally directed. There is no longer much conflict on ideas. There's conflict on personalities. And we have a large percentage of our population that is spewing hate because of the picture drawn of the president, or the picture drawn of Bernie Sanders, or the picture drawn of any one of the candidates out there.
The stakes are a lot higher, and of course the Democrats are dropping off one by one. You can't have half a dozen people running against Trump in November. They're going to have to eventually have the realization this just ain't working. My time is not right now. Let's talk about Paul Fuqua, the realtor. Did you ever think 10 or 15 years ago that you'd be posting as much as you do on social media and Facebook?
Not a clue. I grew up and was very successful in business because of the impact of direct mail, because of the impact of television and the impact of other forms of broadcast media. The social media is absolutely scary to me because you can generate all kinds of emotional responses very unknowingly. And, I take certain stances every now and then on certain issues because I feel like I have to, and I don't mind the fallout from it. But at the same time, you make one remark or you use one term that is considered discriminatory or abusive or whatever, it can be very detrimental to your career.
You're exactly right, because you don't have to talk religion, politics, or sex to get offended or offend someone. Anything. Here's the thing. Years ago, I might call you when you were at a business that you worked at and say, Paul, are you able to talk? Now, with Messenger, you know that the person's available because you can see that green dot there. Mm-hmm. That's scary, too.
Oh, I know. But I was one of the first people in Washington, D.C. to have a cell phone. It cost me almost 5 figures, and I put it in my car, and it looked like a kitchen phone. It was brown. The interior of my car was brown. It had a handset with the little curly Q wires, and I'd drive around downtown D.C. talking to people that are within a 2-block radius of it, because that's all the coverage we had. But it was, at those days, it was something to be to establish yourself, give you street cred. People came in with these great big suitcases with things. I'll never forget Freddie Brown. Georgetown. He was a New York guy, and he showed up at a Kenner League summer game, and he had this thing that you'd have to check in as baggage on a TWA flight, and that was his cell phone. And it was funny the steps to which we went in order to communicate. And now, in this little phone that's in front of me, I have more computing power. 10 times more computing power than was used to get to put a man on the moon. It's amazing. And
you got to be careful, because it's tempting to say something or do something wrong with that little phone that you have right there as well. I remember when I first got one in the early 2000s, the phone bill was $200 or $300 a month.
Oh, look, I go back when it was in 5 figures.
That's nuts.
Well, I was a printing company, and we had to communicate. And what we did, we had our drivers on radios, and then I gave phones, and they were all flip phones in those days, to my salespeople so we could maintain contact with them. I'm still, the thing that worries me more than anything else are the cameras. Now the videos that are being shot. For instance, that Kansas State brawl last night.
It was horrible.
All that film is done with phones. Mm-hmm. It was all done with phones.
It's horrible, and it was still good footage. I mean, it was excellent footage, but it was bad sportsmanship, bad for the game. And I'm sorry, I'm not a big fan of Bill Self. I'm just going to say this. I'm not a fan of Bill Self. I really think he is a very selfish person. He did nothing to stop that fight, and shame on him and shame on that player. Now, Self cannot control his players, but that was as bad a sportsmanship as I've seen in college basketball. I'm not a fan of Bill Self, never will be.
It's, you're talking about an in-state rivalry. That's one. Two, I mean, you go back and you watch the last minute of the game, and it was already chippy. They were getting beaten badly, and a kid makes a steal and goes down, and then he gets hammered. And that's the issue I had with the kid that hammered him on the foul. Look, you're up 21. Let him score.
But the game was over, and these guys, they dunked the ball like you've never seen before. You never saw Monty Towel dunking, for God's sake. You saw David Thompson dunking. Then they step over the player to say, look, I got you and you're defeated. Yep. That's what I don't like.
Right. But that's the discipline, and that comes out of the coach's office. And unfortunately, there's been an erosion of that. If you start looking back over the past several years and the number of coaches who've been attacked for being, quote, abusive, end quote, toward their players. I mean, remember when Bobby Knight was accused of throttling his player?
Yeah.
And that hue and cry, and he did. And I worked clinics with Bobby Knight, and Bobby Knight could be a cruel, merciless person. At the same time, most of his players love him. And he brought order to their lives, and he brought that sense of discipline to the game. You watch his teams during his heyday, they were beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Very
to watch.
disciplined, but his character was suspect. But for the most part, he got the most out of his players. He attended a lot of Coach K's game after he retired as well and worked for ESPN. That did not work out as well. But when they played Ohio State or Michigan or Purdue, it was an event at Indiana, or the red and white uniforms. It was just great, great, great. How do people get a hold of you in your day-to-day real estate?
I'm Paul Fuqua. I'm a real estate agent. I have both a brokerage license in North Carolina and an agent's license here in Virginia. You can reach me at my cell, 757-449-7463, 757-449-7463. Or you can always do the FuquaHomesales.com. FUQUA homesales.com. That's my website.
And very simple. Also can see his link on HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com. Just press that little green logo. It'll take you right to Paul Fuqua. Paul, all the best.
Sports Scene, Hampton Road's premier interview show with Greg Bicouvaris, each Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11.
And you look at that, 4-4 at home, which is just average, 4-3-1 on the road. I mean, you're not going to win any games like that. They were not the same team after they beat the Packers, yet the Packers were a totally different team.
Interact with Sports Scene on Twitter @GregBick and listen weekly as Greg interviews distinguished guests with excellent commentary and insight. Sports Scene, Saturdays at 10 a.m. on the Lighthouse 100.1 FM. It's now time for Greg's Highlights, presented by HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com.
Okay, highlights, gjbtv.com, hrsmhof.com, and HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com, gjbtv.com. Click the YouTube link on the homepage. Our question of the day to Colleen, our producer today. When you go out and you realize the event you were going to is lasting into 3 hours, do you stay the course or you try to leave early?
I'm overly polite, so I try to stay as long as I possibly can, but then, especially since I have a child, I can use that as an excuse.
Very good. Sports Scene will continue after these messages. Mark your calendar for May 28th to May 31st as Saints Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church in Newport News presents the Newport News Greek Festival. Eat, drink, and celebrate authentic Greek culture on the peninsula. Located at 60 Traverse Road, off exit 258B on Route 17 in Newport News. Celebrating a taste of Greece in Newport News. For more, log on to newportnewsgreekfestival.org.
You are listening to Sports Scene with Greg Bicouvaris. Now, back to Greg.
And I want to thank our good friends at Ripley's Believe It or Not in Williamsburg. Great place, 1735 Richmond Road. Give them a call at 757-220-9220. You're never going to know what you're going to see at Ripley's Believe It or Not. Also a great theater there as well. Something for everyone. Great for locals and tourists. That's Williamsburg Ripley's, RIPLEYS.com. Go by and see Jason and the great staff over there as well. Talking to a regular right here on Sports Scene, Adam Winkler from News Channel 3. You've also seen Adam on this Channel 3 for several years, and Sports Scene as well. Also on the line, on websites, Twitter. Adam, welcome back.
Greg, thank you as always for having me, and I guess Happy New Year. I guess it's still in vogue to say that, right?
Yeah, at least for the month of January. Absolutely.
All right, cool.
All right, let's get right to it. Old Dominion basketball. It seems like no matter what happens, it's just going to come down to the tournament. Most people can't name anybody they play, but they're not winning. They're not winning well regardless. They've got a losing record, but I still think they've got just as good a chance as anybody to win the games on the road in the tournament. The question is, can they do 3 games on the road?
That's all that, I mean, it's kind of crazy to know, even going into the season, that nothing that you do, Greg, matters except for 3 days in Frisco, Texas, the second week of March. And that's what they're staring at. I mean, they could have run the table in non-conference and still not had a big enough net ranking or whatever the new RPI is. So I agree with you. I think this team, despite kind of being a group of nobodies, losing B.J. Stith and Ahmad Caver. I think they have what it takes to find a way to put those wins together in March. They're losing games, but they're losing close games in conference play. 9 points were their 3 losses on the road in that early stretch of conference play. So I do think they have a way to get it done, a formula to get it done, and I would not be surprised, like you said, if they do find a way to win the Conference USA tournament in Frisco and get back in the dance. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they get bounced after one game.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to be the businessman, Adam Winkler, the businessman. You only have a few minutes of airtime with you already pretty much knowing that. You know the Texas landscape. You know the remaining schedule in February and March. Do you almost have to be like, what's the point of covering a random Thursday night game, or do you still have some type of presence out there?
I think there's enough fan support for this program that we can justify coverage of every home game. I mean, you look at some of the teams that they come into play, Marshall, Western Kentucky, I think the casual fan is aware of them and is aware of those programs. But you look at the Florida International, the Florida Atlantic, North Texas, maybe not as big of a draw. So you're right. If the Monarchs start stringing together losses like they did earlier in the season, we have to make that content decision. Do we go to Norfolk State? They're winning the MEAC. Do we go to William & Mary? They're winning the Colonial. You bring up a good point, but I have not seen the fan support fall off with ODU men's basketball, and I think that's a testament to Jeff Jones and how he runs his program. They're leading Conference USA in attendance, and I think that says a lot this day and age.
You know, you and I can speak from the media. You look at the Virginia Pilot, Daily Press, they're going to be having buyouts here. I've been told that the media coverage is not as strong for Old Dominion basketball, but I just wonder, you know, why the media doesn't cover them like they used to. We mentioned the football fans, they leave a lot of times at halftime, but basketball, it's intimate, like controlled climate. It's a little bit more, you can see your neighbors without having to worry about if it's 20 degrees outside. But why isn't the media covering them like they used to?
You know, I think that's an interesting point, and I can speak really only to my own experience. This
Sure.
is my 4th basketball season. My first year here, we didn't go as often between games. We wouldn't go out and preview games. We wouldn't do as many feature stories because they really weren't winning as many games, but they've been consistently good. And then you look at 2 years ago when the expectations were up there, they were higher. Last year, I mean, I think we all knew they were expected to contend for the conference championship, and then they were pretty much winning the league the entire regular season, and fans were showing up. They led the conference in attendance. That justifies your coverage. You've got a winning team. You've got your neighbors, your viewers, your customers spending money to go to the arena. So it was justified last year. This year, earlier in the season, would they lose 8 straight in non-conference? Yeah, you might not be able to justify that. If fans aren't showing up and they're not winning games, maybe we find other things to cover. And that's also, as you know, Greg, in the heart of football season here, in the heart of high school playoffs, NFL postseason runs, you have to fight for your airtime. And earlier, the non-conference, ODU men's hoops, they just weren't doing it.
Yeah, not to mention, too, that you got everybody able to pretty much follow it everywhere. ESPN.com, you can follow the score in real time. You've got all these advantages of one-line following that a lot of fans are just saying, I can just keep up with the score, even though I don't want to watch it on my phone, whatever, because they don't like the broadcast. They can still keep up with the score without even turning on the radio.
And you and I could do an hour-long show just
Sure.
on this topic alone. This is a great indictment, if you will, of the sports media industry. You know, why would I spend 45 seconds of my 2.5 minutes a night to show you scores and highlights when you can take 10 seconds and find the score on your phone? So my job as a sports director is to find a way to get you the information in a way that others won't. Let's be compelling. Let's be different. Let's be creative. Let's weave a story into these highlights and maybe not just give you boring, eyewash scores and highlights. That is what we are driven. That's our task every night, because you're exactly right. Folks can find the final score on their phone. What can we offer them that their screen does not?
Switching gears to football, Ron Rivera, your thoughts?
Home run hire. I don't think the Redskins could have done any better. Sure, Urban Meyer would have been a huge name. Something like that would have been a massive name. But Ron Rivera, he's got pretty good skins, no pun intended, on the wall. And this guy, he's proven that he's not going to deal with a bunch of distractions. He's going to keep things in-house, not a big drama guy, which is exactly what the Redskins needed. And as you know, when you replace a guy, you always bring in the opposite. Jay Gruden, offensive guy. Ron Rivera, defensive guy. Jay Gruden, players coach. A lot of drama surrounding him and personalities. Ron Rivera, never hear about any of that stuff. We didn't hear about Josh Norman until he left Carolina. You know, all the stuff that he likes to pull. I think it's a phenomenal hire for the Redskins. I don't know how soon he will win, but if anybody can win in Washington, it's Rivera.
Yeah, one thing stood out. Usually coaches bring in their own assistants. Ron Rivera did that. Kudos to Dan Snyder. He hired him very quick. He barely wasted any time. Got a guy who's a no-nonsense guy who's been to the Super Bowl before. And one thing, too, that sticks out, too, was we interviewed Doug Williams way back when he has the UFL down here in Virginia Beach several years ago, that Rivera did not put him in a high position. He pretty much just said, you're going to manage the players in-house, kind of be like the principal or kind of be like the tutor or whatever, but he has not got an evolving position outside of the arena. It's pretty much like he's keeping an eye. He's like the in-house manager for Doug Williams. Your thought on that? That kind of got lost in the shuffle there.
And, I mean, Greg, this is crazy to say, but Dan Snyder's been doing a lot of stuff right since the football season ended. I mean, you run Bruce Allen out, you hire Ron Rivera, you kind of get rid of the revolving door of personnel, you know, this guy's sort of going to be the GM, but he's not going to call the shots. There's more structure there than there's been in years. There's more accountability there than there's been in years, and there's a feeling of optimism that has not been a part of that franchise since I started working the beat, which was before the 2016 season. So I bite my tongue a little bit when I say it, but maybe Dan Snyder is undergoing a bit of a renaissance because he realizes just how far this once mighty brand has fallen.
Yeah, the Eagles and Giants game, last few home games look like road games as far as the fans. Talking to Adam Winkler and Channel 3. Adam, go ahead and give us your Twitter handle as well.
It is at Adam Wink Sports on Twitter, and of course everything we do on air online can be found at WTKR.com.
Now, does your staff pretty much, I know you make the lead there as far as what to cover, what to put on the air. It's almost like every day's a new adventure, whether it's a weekday or weekend. What is relevant enough to make our airwaves that'll stand out besides the mundane, you know, the Admirals one or Old Dominion one or William and Mary one? Because like you said, pretty much everybody can get the score.
While I love football season, because I don't think anybody can argue, football is king in this area. It is the most important sport to the most people. I love football season, but I also love when we get out of the football season, out of high school football and college football, because it allows us to tell more stories and tell different stories. Right now we're really looking around at what's relevant. You know, we've done a couple stories on William and Mary men's basketball. They're off to a historical start under first-year head coach Dane Fisher. We've given the ODU women's basketball team some love under Nikki McRae. They're winning more games than they have in years past, and they are warranting more coverage. Norfolk State, on top of the MEAC, we've done a story on Jacob Milton, a Norfolk State high jumper. We've caught up with Tyrod Taylor, who's back in town to help with a grand opening in Hampton. We've done, dabbled in different kind of niche sports. We did a father-daughter monster truck story when they rolled through Hampton here recently. So while we all love football season and the routine and the constant storylines, being outside of football season allows us to spread our wings a little bit more and have a little more creativity in our nightly content.
Yeah, I can finally breathe. You can breathe after football. We're both on the road a lot.
A little better.
Oh, absolutely. I was at the Ravens game most recently, the one they went to the divisional and just fell flat in their face. And I tell you, that Henry is unbelievable. He got just as much attention about his hair as he did his football. But regardless, the Ravens have not proven themselves in the postseason that well the last 2 years.
They have not, and I think that, fair or not, that is going to be the asterisk, if you will, on Lamar Jackson. Until he goes and wins a playoff game, people are going to wonder if he'll ever be a championship quarterback. He's rewriting the record book. He's going to be the MVP, but, Dan Marino, he did a whole lot in the regular season, too. What does he have to show for it? Charles Barkley did a whole lot in the regular season. What does he have to show for it? Those things stick with legendary, game-changing, transcendent players. A guy like Allen Iverson. I don't think Lamar Jackson will continue to go one and done in the postseason, but they're going to have to stack a couple of postseason wins together, especially if you get home games in Baltimore. You can't be losing in the first round, even if you're trying to tackle a refrigerator on cleats like Derrick Henry is.
Let me get your opinion about this. This is kind of interesting recently. It involved the pregame shows both on Fox and CBS, where the gentleman from the Hall of Fame interrupted the shows. And I'm going to say that because that is an interruption. These guys they're not needing the network airtime as far as Cowher or Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson didn't do as many shows this year because he's cutting back because of age and travel. But for them to be interrupted like that, I know it's not a clearance sweepstakes where somebody's knocking at your door. They thought it was more of an agenda for the Hall of Fame to get themselves out there to say, hey, as opposed to a phone call or a video conference. Do you like the fact that they were interrupted because of that, or was that more of an agenda if you see through things from the Hall of Fame to say, hey, we're here? And the guy that did the awarding, he's huge. I mean, he's got a monster presence. Baker is his name. But,
David Baker.
Yeah, your thoughts on that, because that did interrupt two pregame shows. I know it was great, but, the wow factor could have been there the night before.
I think that everything the NFL does is pointed towards an audience, towards viewers. I don't think they would have done it if it was week 13 of the 1 o'clock slot on Fox. They did it because those were two marquee postseason windows, and they wanted to raise awareness as to who David Baker is, as to that there is a Centennial Hall of Fame class. It was all part of this NFL 100 and letting folks know that there's this extra group of folks going into Canton, Ohio. While, yes, it did interrupt, I think it would become more of a nuisance if they continue to do it. I love when things are different, things I haven't seen before, true and raw, and you don't get enough of that in TV anymore. I thought the raw emotion of Cowher and Johnson and seeing how happy their coworkers were, I thought that made for really good TV. And I don't think the NFL needs to do it anymore because you're never going to replicate those two instances, because then it will become canned and almost expected. It worked because it was unexpected and folks didn't know about it. So I realize it's kind of a riding the fence answer, but I thought it was outstanding TV. But should it continue and they do it more, it would wear on me a little bit.
And right, you put yourself out there. I totally agree. The raw emotion was excellent from Cowher and Jimmy Johnson. They were both very emotional, especially Jimmy Johnson. But it was great. But devil's advocate, I had some people text me saying, who is this David Baker guy? And one person texted me, oh, he's the one I just Googled that forged a $48,000 check. Is that the same one? And I had to say,
yeah, you
yes.
open yourself up. And also, there's also the side of it that you take away that moment from Cowher and Johnson to be in their hotel room at the Super Bowl city and get that knock on the door and enjoy it with family. You open it up from 3 to 5 to 7 people intimately in a hotel room to millions watching. So there is the other side of the coin for sure.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. March Madness coming up. Just look at the teams in the state of Virginia. Virginia, definitely not the same team they were in basketball last year. Virginia Tech, obviously they're above average, but neither team is great. It's wide open. William Mary's definitely never made the NCAA tournament. I think Old Dominion made it last year. I think they're definitely overdue.
William & Mary, it is time. And I think this year is stacking up to where they could do it. The conference tournament's in Washington, D.C. The league isn't as strong as it's been in years past. William & Mary has 2 game changers, one in Nathan Knight, which will be one of the best players to ever come to Williamsburg. This absolutely could be the year for William & Mary. And you're right, UVA, they're going to struggle to make the tournament. The Hokies under Mike Young, I think they're in pretty solid shape. But the ACC, what's up with the ACC? North Carolina in last place. Virginia Tech, heavy favorites taking on the Tar Heels this week. It is certainly an interesting year. And like we discussed earlier, I would not be surprised to see ODU win the Conference USA tournament and get in. And wouldn't that be something, Greg, if William & Mary and ODU and Virginia Tech are in the dance and UVA is at home?
Yeah, it's the NCAA tournament. One of the sites is in Greensboro. Of course, CBS does a great job with that. And, of course, the ACC tournament's in Greensboro, too. So Greensboro is going to be a hot place here in a couple of months. Adam, all the best to you and your family, and we look forward to talking to you on Sports Scene down the road.
Sports Scene, Hampton Roads premier interview show with Greg Bicouvaris, each Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11.
And you look at that, 4-4 at home, which is just average, 4-3-1 on the road. I mean, you're not going to win any games like that. They were not the same team after they beat the Packers, yet the Packers were a totally different team.
Interact with Sports Scene on Twitter at Greg Bick, and listen weekly as Greg interviews distinguished guests with excellent commentary and insight. Sports Scene, Saturdays at 10 a.m. on the Lighthouse 100.1 FM. What tees you off? Presented by HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com.
All right, Sports Scene every Saturday morning at Greg Bick on Twitter. Greg Bicouvaris, glad you're with us, with Colleen right here filling in for Andrew on our favorite segment, What Tees Me Off. Colleen, multiple doors that are locked at a front entrance, let's say when you're going to a store and the store is open, but you have to knock and try to get the associate's attention. Your thoughts on that? Just trying to reach out and get those doors open.
It's frustrating.
It really is. How about this? You see this in public a lot. Annoying whistling coming out of nowhere to get somebody's attention. That annoying whistle.
You wonder what they're trying to do.
Exactly. Sporting events that are catered to TV at night, but not caring about the people who are in attendance when it's cold as well. I'm serious. I had to go to a game that started at 8:15 the other night a few weeks ago. I was miserable. I prefer games to be played during the day.
Not just that, but even we went to a high school basketball game which started at 8:30, and I couldn't believe it was that late.
That is very late. When a simple 1 to 2 text tries to get your point across, ends up being double-digit text like, come on, let's talk. We don't need a novel. Let's just say, hey, how are you? Good. And then all of a sudden, how was your day? It was really good. It can continue to be a novel. It's not meant for that.
Rather talk on the phone.
Exactly. Colleen, we've dealt with this. Everybody has. Even kids have dealt with this. People who only think of themselves. That's not good.
No, not good.
Absolutely. Also, what's not good is one-word answers. You'd like a little elaboration, correct?
A little bit.
Yes. How about this? You've seen this before, too, even when you were a teenager. People who roll their eyes, even by accident, that's just a bad look totally.
Oh, yes. And we have to be careful, especially on FaceTime.
Exactly right. All right, we just recovered from all these holidays. I mean, I'm kind of like the Scrooge when it comes to holidays. I'm all about family, but too many holidays that the banks are closed, already have limited hours to begin with. The banks seem to be closed even for Groundhog Day. Joking, but still, too many holidays that banks are closed.
Hey, I don't mind that. Then I don't have to go to the bank to deposit stuff for the station.
That's true. When companies want you to register online, because it's not easier for the customer, but a less load for the business, they want you to do all this online registration, so it takes away from the office manager or the business people at the office, for especially during tax time.
They're simplifying so that they don't have to have extra people working.
Very good. That's what tees me off.
You are listening to Sports Scene with Greg Bicouvaris. Now, back to Greg.
I want to thank our guests today, Paul Fuqua in the studio and Adam Winkler from Channel 3. For more, log on to gjbtv.com, at Greg Bick on Twitter. That's GREGBIC. Sports Scene airs every Saturday from 10 to 11 on 100.1 FM, 1010 AM. TuneIn.com by typing WPMH in the search bar. For Colleen, I'm Greg Bicouvaris. We'll talk to you soon.
Sports Scene, Hampton Roads premier interview show with Greg Bicouvaris, each Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11.
And you look at that, 4-4 at home, which is just average, 4-3-1 on the road. I mean, you're not going to win any games like that. They were not the same team after they beat the Packers, yet the Packers were a totally different team.
Interact with Sports Scene on Twitter at Greg Bick, and listen weekly as Greg interviews distinguished guests with excellent commentary and insight. Sports Scene, Saturdays at 10 a.m. on the Lighthouse 100.1 FM.
Mark your calendar for May 28th to May 31st as Saints Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church in Newport News presents the Newport News Greek Festival. Eat, drink, and celebrate authentic Greek culture on the peninsula. Located at 60 Traverse Road, off exit 258B on Route 17 in Newport News. Celebrating a taste of Greece in Newport News. For more, log on to newportnewsgreekfestival.org.